Welcome to the Mobile Hunters Dojo, a community helping hunters reach their full potential in the woods and in life. I'm your host, Matt Lear. Come on in, kick off your shoes, and take a seat on the mat as we develop a mindset for success, forge self-discipline, practice the art of continuous improvement, and hone our craft. Hey everyone, it's your host Matt Lear, and I'm super pumped to bring this podcast to you today. Jennings from New York stopped by the dojo, and we got into some amazing conversation around tactics and mindset. And what you're going to hear over and over again is you have to get outside the box, and you got to do whatever it takes to get it done. I'm super pumped up for this one. After you listen to this, comment on Instagram and Facebook over at the Mobile Hunter Dojo, and let me know what you thought about this one. Let's not wait any longer and jump right into it. Well, I love your content, for one. I really do. And I even like what the little clips that you put together, some of the, like the music or the overlay, the talking around it, kind of gave me a little bit of insight into who you are a little bit. And it's this really like competitive, driving, like good enough is never good enough type of feeling when I watch these clips, and you're accomplishing something that is really rare on public land. And I think you're just doing it on another level that only a few people can do it on. And the fact that you were willing to come onto the podcast and do this, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on and doing that. But you do it, and your clips are done well. Everything you do, you do well. So it immediately sparked my attention. So I wanted to get you on and kind of just dive into that mindset, dive into who you are a little bit, and then maybe get some tactics, whatever comes out. It'll be good. So give them a little bit of background of who you are, where you're from, and what you're about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate it. For those who don't know me, and I'm sure there's a lot that don't, my name's Tyler Jennings from Central New York. First and foremost, I'm a father. I have 3 young kids, 3 under 4. I'm a husband, and a dedicated husband and father, I should add. And then second, but close, I'm a public land whitetail hunter. It's close. So, and I work in nuclear, so I work a swing shift. So, depending on your perspective, I have a lot of time or I don't have a lot of time, but I make sure it is a priority in my life to get out there. So that's what I do. That's who I am.
Yeah. And I love that you said it depends on how you look at it, right? Because somebody could say, well, man, I'm working third shift, or I'm working 12-hour days, and I just don't have enough time to put it out and get out there. But I guess as far as what does that look like for you? Like, how often are you pouring yourself into your craft, like throughout the year?
Well, every single day I have to do something. As natural as it is for people to wake up and put their socks on, I have to be out. I have to be looking at maps. I have to be shooting my bow. Most of the time I do several of those things every day. So like I said, 12-hour shifts, rotating swing shift, nights, days. And like I told you off air, I will create a false sense of competition amongst other hunters just to motivate myself to get out there. I'll work 4 night shifts in a row. And instead of going home and going to sleep, I'll drive out to the public lands and I'll scout for 6-7 hours and do my thing. So I just have to do it. It's part of who I am. It's in my DNA.
Yeah, it's a must, right?
Yeah, it is. It is a must. If I don't do it, it affects everybody around me. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. I was born and raised in this public land arena. My dad's been hunting public land for 40 years. So it is important to know, like, that's how I was brought up. A lot of the tactics, a lot of the gear, a lot of the mobile niche stuff that you see today, he was doing 40 years ago. That's how I was brought up. Racks on bikes, manipulating tree stands and building your own racks and building your own bow holders on tree stands and sticks and all those tactics, getting in deep into bedding areas. He was doing that. And it was a competitive drive for him as well, trying to just get away from the masses. So that's how I was brought up. I was born and raised in this public land arena.
Man, that's awesome. And I do want to point out, like, so the dojo, one of the concepts of calling the podcast the the Mobile Hunters Dojo, is that there's different levels, right? People are at different levels. There's white belt, blue belt, yellow belt, whatever. You're definitely a black belt in this arena. And I I wanted to point that out because I think early on when I was listening to podcasts, I would listen to somebody who's like a black belt and go, "Oh my gosh, that's like so far beyond where I am ever going to be or can be." And I think that's a false thing too, because I've gotten a lot farther than I ever thought I would. But there's something to be learned. Even if you're a white belt today and you're listening to this podcast, there's going to be so much that you can learn today that you may not be able to apply today, but you'll be able to apply some of it. And so one of the black belt things is the kind of deer that you're going after for one on public land.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Like what qualifies a target for you?
Well, it's progressed. Like you said, there's different levels. And I wasn't, I said earlier, I was born and raised in this type of hunting atmosphere, but I've shot a ton of deer. My first deer was a button buck. And, thankfully, my dad took me out and showed me the ropes and sat with me. And I went through that progression, just having fun shooting a deer or seeing deer really in public land. It's, if I see a handful of deer a year, that's something special. I don't see 5-6 deer every day.
Yeah.
So, but now, as the years go on, it's 5-year-olds or better, really.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is because I'm out there so much. I spend so much time out there. I don't want to be an intruder. I don't want to feel like a stranger. I want to be part of that landscape. And I'll follow deer for years, 4-5 years, if I can, and learn everything about them and hunt them if I'm lucky enough to. So I think it's the last 5, 6, maybe 7 years I've killed 4-year-old or older. Most were 5 or 6. And that's just what I like. That's the challenge. And, everybody else has their own unique challenge and their own path, but that's what I'm after. And that's what gives me the most satisfaction is finding the wittiest, most challenging deer and looking for him, finding him, and then hopefully being able to hunt him.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what does it mean to like look for them and find them and kind of, you were saying you're kind of tracking deer throughout the years. Like, what does that look like?
Well, it's a lot of time behind glass. And there's some trail camera usage. I didn't listen to the last podcast with Tyler, but he's another New York guy, and I know he doesn't use trail cams, and it's a gray area in New York State as whether they're legal or not. If I use them, I get a TRP from the DEC, so I've kind of shied away from that. But it was a lot of trail cams, a lot of glassing, but most of the time now it's glassing, and a lot of the stuff I hunt is river bottom, so I have a little bit of open terrain. But man, I'll just, like I said, I look at these deer so much. I mean, I have a lot of time at work to look at them too. So if they don't have antlers, I can tell who they are.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things. I'll just follow these deer 3, 4, 5 years if I can, and I'll hunt them if I'm lucky enough to.
That I don't hear that talked about a lot at all in the podcast world about going out and glassing these deer throughout the year. Are you doing that like all year round? Are you besides hunting them?
Yeah, and I know Tyler from the last podcast, he does a lot of that too. I think that's how he got on that buck from last season. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't think about this stuff. They're stuck in a box, and you got to think outside the box. You can climb up a tree with your Lone Wolf custom gear stand or saddle in the wintertime or the springtime in glass deer. And you don't have to climb up a tree just because it's hunting season. So, if I have to get elevated, I will. But a lot of times I have a spot and scope back there. I don't know if you can see, it's in a little case right there.
Okay.
I'll take that out and I'll glass fields, or I'll glass river bottom, or I'll glass hillsides, and I'll watch these deer, and I'll see what they're doing, where they're coming from. Yeah, of course they're doing different things in the winter as they are in the summer, as they are in the fall. But a lot of times that I see in my experience is there's a lot of overlap. Where they are in the summer, they might be in the fall. Where they are in the winter, they probably are in the fall. So there's quite a bit of overlap there. And, everything is important. If you can get eyes on them, that's number one. Just find them, period. Point blank. Don't even climb a tree. Don't do anything. Just find them.
Yeah. Yeah. So How far away are you? I mean, you said you're talking about river bottoms. I mean, are these like wide river bottoms? I mean, where like I guess I'm trying to figure out how much you can see while you're glassing them. Are you getting just glimpses of them, or you're able to monitor them for half hour, hour? Like,
Yeah, it all depends. There's, you know, these aren't giant river bottoms, but luckily in New York we have a lot of diverse terrain and habitat. It's all due to deglaciation, millions of
yep.
years. So we have drumlins, we have, hills, mountains, we have river bottoms. So we get a good mix, but a lot of it is open. There's some farmland that I hunt. So yeah, I mean, I can get half hour, hour, 10 minutes, whatever it is. I just want to verify that there's life. I want to find that deer. And right now I'm chasing a deer that I don't have a lot of information on. And it's kind of giving me a little anxiety because I don't know what he looks like without antlers. So it's hard for me to collect any info. I kind of got to wait until he's got some antlers growing.
So that anxiety factor, that's something I resonate with. Like, I need it. Like, I need this feeling to like propel me forward and keep me like. It's not because I'm not disciplined, but when I have it, when I'm stressing out about something, some people can hear that and go, "Oh, that sounds bad," but it's actually like a motivator for me, man. I start like really honing in and focusing in when I've got that little bit of anxiety. Does that something that I mean? Is that something that occurs regularly around deer with you? Like, it's just like, I need more information. I need to get this more. I need to keep doing this. Is it like this feeling inside that propels you?
Yeah, it's a constant stress. It's a
Yeah.
good, but and I know it's just where I'm at right now in my hunting journey, so to speak. I'm just honed in on big trophy deer, and it's at any cost at this point. And I know I'll probably grow out of that at some point. It'll become more about the experience, but yeah, there's a healthy bit of anxiety and stress, and that's part of the whole. I'm driven by that and the competitiveness of public land. And like we talked about off air, I know a lot of people, it's going to be a hot take, but hunting is competitive, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to say it's not, and I'm not sure why, but I mean, that's the foundation of our species was hunting grounds and competing for game species and food. I mean, it's just built into our DNA. So I'll have a little bit of that anxiety. I'll have a little bit of stress because I want to make sure I have enough information to hunt a deer, and then I'll always somehow create some false sense of competitiveness with the other hunters in the parking lot who don't even know I exist. But that's just how I am. That's how I'm wired.
Yeah, I love it. I'm wired similarly in probably different areas because I'm not doing what you're doing, but I totally resonate with that and I get that. And I think it's just important, like as we talk about levels, like assessing when you're setting goals. I'm talking to the listeners at this point. When you're setting goals and you see someone like Tyler or some of these other like really successful hunters out there, and you're thinking, well, that's what I want to do. Well, realize it comes with this price. It comes with this like I like what you call this healthy level of stress. And if I think you got to kind of be wired for it if you want to excel on this level. You got to kind of have that in you to drive you. So, and that's not to say you can't reach that level. I'm just saying set the appropriate goals where you're at. Do you want to live that level of stress? Do you want to have that level of sacrifice? And I want to go in the sacrifice piece for you a little bit with you. What does that look like? If someone wants to perform on your level and do what you're doing, what does that level of sacrifice look like?
Yeah, you made a lot of good points. There is a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of, like I said, I have 3 kids under the age of 4. I'm married. I have a wife. I have a family. We like to do a lot of stuff. I mean, we did about 5 million things today with this nice weather. So I sacrifice a lot of sleep. I sacrifice a lot of time at hunting camp with my family. I don't spend the time with them. I'm so hyper fixated and singularly focused that I can't have any of that. I could, I own a camp out, near some of these public lands that I hunt, but I don't even go. I'm
Yeah.
there. I'm back to spend the time that is required to maintain a healthy marriage and be a good dad. And then I'm back out. And if I have to drive out 3 times, I will. So it's just, there's a lot of sacrifice, and I've sacrificed career opportunities. I've turned down multiple job offers because I feel like it would encroach on my hunting time. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and it's very close. It's a very close second. I'm a bow hunter. I'm a whitetail hunter. So all that stuff is ancillary. It's secondary to me. So it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I'll walk out there if I have to sacrifice my truck or whatever it is. It's got to happen. I have to do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I could not give it up.
Oh man, so much to unpack there, man. That is so good. Going back a little bit, back to like finding these bucks and watching these deer. So into season, how many target animals do you have?
Yeah, that varies from year to year, of course. Just trying to think this year, last year. It's on average, I would say there's probably 3 to 4 deer that I have a little bit of a beat on that are 5 years old or older. And that's across multiple counties. That's across thousands of acres. So there's not a lot of them. I mean, like, this is New York State. This is public land. I mean, we have a ton of hunters. We have a really, really long rifle season that starts before the rut, goes through the rut, and all the way into when they're herded up in the wintertime. So these deer, they don't get a break. So it's not easy to find these deer. But like I said earlier, like, that is first and foremost just finding them.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is secondary. Tree stand, deer, everything is so secondary. The weapon of choice, just find the deer.
Man, I'm so glad you just said that. So how much time do you focus in on your gear and stuff like that? I mean, because it's important.
Yeah. Relative to the time I spend on a deer, it's nothing. But probably compared to the average guy, I spend an eternity on my gear. I'm a bow tech. My dad owns a archery shop. He has for 30 plus years. So I have a press right over here, and I do all my own work on my bow and, strings, all that stuff. I'm very meticulous. I got a Lone Wolf custom gear stand and the whole 9 yards. Everything's all packed away right there, and I build my own arrows. So I spend a ton of time on gear. But you could give me a 5-gallon bucket and a stick and a string and a sharp stick to shoot with, and I'm going to do the same thing. That stuff is nothing. It means nothing. And I know everybody hates that, and they love all this gear, and I love it too, but it's so far down the list, it's not even funny.
That clip right there is going to be the golden clip that we're going to play over and over and over again, because, I found myself, falling into that trap of like focusing on gear and all these other things besides the deer, like what you're saying, find the deer. And my results were nothing, or sporadic and barely anything. And then when I stopped focusing on the gear like that, like you say, I'm like you, I'm still do put a lot of time into gear, probably even maybe more than other people, but comparative to the other stuff that I'm doing around, deer, it's a lot less. I think that's a point that really needs to sink in with a lot of people. I love you saying, like, give me a bucket, a stick, and a string, and it's going to happen. Like, getting that mindset to think that way and focus on the right things. And the gear is not number one. That's secondary. That I want to drive home every time I'm on a podcast with somebody. So thank you for saying that.
But I'll reiterate it. Like, you need nothing. You need nothing. You need a proficiency with any weapon, and you need to just be out there, and you need to find the deer. It doesn't matter the camouflage, the brand. I mean, I see it. It's funny because I've been in this Instagram, this social media game for a little while, and I've been in the industry. I go to dealer shows, so I see the trends, and I'm seeing all these guys, and they're big buck killers, but some of them drive me nuts because they're just this camo for this 2 years, the next 2 years, this camo. And, these guys that are running these brands, they're great guys. But I mean, some of these guys they're visiting podcasts, and they're barely on social media. But when they are, it's a post about their partners. And it's like, man, I get it. But it's almost like you sold yourself. And I don't like it. I mean, I've been in the position. I've worked with brands and I've quit because it's not me.
Yeah.
I'm not, because the gear doesn't matter. Like I said, you could put me in a loincloth with a bucket and a sharp stick and the results are going to be the same, because that has no weight at all.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I just had a conversation with a buddy. I don't know, it might have been yesterday, or the day before, where there's a guy that I think is amazing. His ability in hunting. I think most people think that about him. And when he does teach on a podcast, I love it. It's great. But almost, I'd say 90, 95, maybe even higher percent of his posts are just like a commercial.
Yeah.
Like, so when I see his story come across, I don't even click on it because I know it's just an ad for something.
It's a shame.
And it disappoints me. And it's also why this podcast isn't sponsored and will never be sponsored. Man, it's scary when you say never, because especially when you record it. But I do it on purpose.
Hold yourself accountable.
Damn right. Yeah. And it's because I really, like you said in the beginning, I don't think we were recording, but you said, this isn't something I do all the time, but I have all this knowledge, and why just keep it for myself? Like it should go out and help other people.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do here too. So I resonate with you there, and I agree with you 100%. And that's also something that stuck out with when I was watching some of your stuff. I just was like, I was waiting for the commercials, man. I'm like, where's the commercials? And there just wasn't. And I appreciate that, because you're in a stance where you could actually benefit.
Well, I'll tell you this, it's a battle. I mean, I've had those conversations. I've read those contracts. I've signed them, and I've done it, and I've been down that road. And like I said, I'm not afraid to be like, I'm done. I quit. Like it's selling your soul. It really is. It's like, this is not what it's about. And I get it. I want these brands to survive, but man, it's a bad message, in my opinion, when all these guys that, you kind of look up to, or you look at as peers, and, you'd like to, I'd like to compete with some of these guys. I know that's not, the typical take on it, but I'd like to go out and be dropped in a piece of public with these guys and see who brings out the biggest buck. But a lot of these guys, it's just commercials now. It's just, they're 2 posts a month that they're required by contract to post.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, but I get it, because, there's some compensation there maybe. So
yeah, I get it too. And I don't want to go too hard on it when I usually speak on it, but it is a shame. And it's a shame here's why I think it's a shame. And then we'll move on back to the good stuff. The reason why I think it's a shame is because they have even if they didn't want it, people look up to them and people want to learn from them. And unfortunately, and we do need gear. We all use it. I like good gear. I mean, I've got stuff hanging behind me, but derails the growth of the people who are looking up to them. They start focusing on this other stuff when that person knows damn well they got to where they're at, not because of the gear. and if 90% of your content is focused on gear, well, then people think they need to focus on gear. And it's just bringing people the wrong direction. And that's what I think is a shame about it. I'm not upset about somebody making money off of a skill that they have, or the hard work that they put in. I'm all for companies making stuff and selling it. I want them to be successful, and I want them to make as much money as they possibly can. It just can't come at the expense of other people. And I don't know if they realize that that's what's happening, is that their influence is moving people down a direction that isn't really going to open up a lot of doors for them. And there's a lot of people that just love what we're doing. They love hunting, and they so badly want to improve, and they think they are going down the right steps because they're following that individual.
Right. And that's very well said. And I agree with you 100%. And I think my opinions on it are selfish, because I want to extract every ounce of information I can out of these people, and it's almost like it stalls out at a certain point. So like, I have a lot of respect for all these guys that do that. They got to that point because they're successful and they're driven and hardworking. But like I said, it's maybe a little bit of selfish projection on my end, because I want to extract the info. But when I see 15% off of so-and-so, like, come on.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. This whole idea of finding the bucks, man, like you've said it bunch of times now, like that's the most important thing. And this might be a little hard because you've I'm sure you're getting on new property. So what does that look like if you're on new property? Like what's the first step if you're walking out and you're going, I need to find a buck on this property? What are you going to do?
Yeah, depends on what time of year, but I have a ton of properties, but like springtime, postseason, I just got to put boots on the ground. I got to look at it. I mean, I'm so sick of EMAPs personally, and
Yeah.
they're great, but so many times in recent years, I've found these 6-year-old deer right next 10 yards from a walking path in a clump of cattails or on a side hill. And they're just not where these EMAPs, you know, show the best spots to be, in my opinion. So that's just my experience. So first thing I'll do is I'll go out there postseason, springtime, and I'll hit it before it greens up, and I'll find, the most remote stuff, or I'll find, something right next to a parking lot if it looks good. But I'll do that so that when I'm home or I'm at work or I'm trying to sleep and I can't, and I'm visualizing these places, I know what they look like and I put eyes on it. And then after that, it's a lot of glassing. And if I have the right permits, I'll run some trail cameras. But like I can think of a couple pieces of property right now that I'm really excited about. And I'm going to get up on some side hills and I'm going to bring the spotting scope and I'm going to glass all summer. I mean, I'm covered right now with mosquito bites. I was out the other day and it's a bad year for mosquitoes. So I'm looking forward to that, but a lot of glass.
So when you're walking in the springtime, are you trying to be efficient or are you wandering throughout, I mean, when I say wandering, obviously you have an eye for what you need to find, but yeah, are you efficient? Are you wandering? Is there another method that I haven't mentioned? What does it look like?
So I've always tried to be systematic, and I have a buddy who's a real good deer hunter. I have a lot of respect for, and he's a little bit more systematic, and I just can't do it. I am a wanderer, an explorer. I can't have a list. I can't have goals. That gives me anxiety. So I go out and I just walk and I explore and I look. And obviously I'm not aimlessly walking through open hardwoods.
Yep.
I'm gravitating towards these areas. And it's funny. I've never really said this out loud, but I find myself almost pretending to be a big buck out there, like fitting, measurement wise, fitting between stuff, fitting, walking next to these edges and where's he going to dump down if he gets spooked? Where's he going to come out? Can he come out? Would he walk here? I'll get down to that level and see, what does he see? And, that's kind of how I navigate through the woods and through these edges. And, a lot of times I end up in swamps and I'm waist deep in water. So there's that aspect to it. But I do wander. It's mostly wandering and exploring, based on all the things I've learned over 25 years of doing this. I take it for granted what I can see, what probably a lot of people can't see if they're newer to this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guarantee you can see way more than I can see, but I wander as well. And that's what's actually like, I've grown exponentially in my ability to find the right sign by spending shit ton of time out in the woods, wandering around and just like you starting to think, okay, how would a deer think? And for me, that's a relatively new thing in the last maybe 3 years for me, is to really try to put myself in that buck's mindset. And it's almost like I'm creating a buck, like a character in my head. Yeah. Like I haven't found him yet, right? But I'm pretending like this buck that I'm after is there, and this is how he's thinking. And it feels silly at first when you're doing it, but I do believe that's like another transition moment as a hunter is you think more generally like technical stuff. This is what deer do. This is a sign that I'm supposed to look for. And you get so far with that. And the more and more I talk to guys like you, the more and more I hear them in a narrative form, thinking like or talking like the deer. And I started to apply that in my own life. And I don't know, it has worked. I don't know it's worked because I've thought that way. Like part of me is like, I don't know, it might just be another reason why this worked out. But I tell you, every time I do it, it seems to start really opening up doors for me. Yeah. So it's interesting, kind of like a graduation, moving into that next level of thinking like that. But so I'm really happy to hear you say I've been saying this lately, like kind of moving on from e-scouting. Like I'll look at it generally I used to spend hours and hours and hours, finding points and putting X's down and trying to get down to the granular level on the maps and trying to figure everything out. And then I'd get there and it just wouldn't turn out to be the way that I wanted it to be. And it was more or less, I would kind of wander and find what I needed to find that way. I've actually just started to not use e-scouting anymore. I mean, I'll find a property that way that looks interesting, but from there, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to kind of wander around. And like you, yeah, we're skipping the big wide open woods and stuff like that. But also the next to the paths, that's been really interesting for me too. It's like, holy cow. And it makes complete sense when you think about it though, because they're able to monitor and kind of keep an eye on, I mean, they're downwind of all the human pressure, and so awesome. So now that you're walking in summertime, like you said, now so if you found the sign, I'm assuming we're talking about, you've probably found some tracks that look like it's from a big buck. You found big buck, possibly rubs, some huge scrapes that look really good for you. You're feeling like there could be one here. How do you actually get your eyes on them now? So are you now just spending time in the woods glassing and moving around until you find, or are you actually finding beds at that point though, like in that early season?
Yeah. So I don't typically find a lot of rubs or scrapes, and I don't know why. And I theorize that maybe it's a conscious defense mechanism, but I don't know if deer can reason that way. Like, are they associating their sign with being shot at? I don't know. It also could be a deer density thing. When I do find it, it's kind of in like a hub where a lot of bucks will be. So there's that factor too. But like some of the most mature deer that I've killed over the last few years, virtually no sign.
Yeah.
Almost none. And it's fascinating. So, if I find it, great. If I don't, I'm not discouraged. It's more of like, is this where a big buck would spend his time? And I do find a lot of beds, and I've killed deer over their beds. I've seen them get up and bust out, the bump and dump method. So yeah, I'll find the sign. I'll find what I like. It's almost like an internal meter, and that recalibrates every year that you're out there, and it's just instinct at that point. It's intuition. And I have a whiteboard over here, big whiteboard with a ton of different information on it. I have a big, I don't know, it's probably 4 feet by 3 feet, maybe 5 feet by 3 feet white erase map of one of the areas I hunt. I have another map here, white erase or dry erase, and I'll just go to town. I'll put my tracker on, my Onyx tracker, when I scout, and a lot of times I'm just moving through like a deer would, and I'll go back and I'll look on my maps, and I'll draw it out where I think they could be, and then from there, it's, if I can use trail cameras, I will. If I can't, it's 100% glassing and hunting at that point. And that's just the way it is. Well, shed hunting comes in there too a little bit, but I don't put a ton of stock into that, because I find a lot of these sheds of these deer that I'm chasing 2 miles from where I'm hunting them.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you've done that, you walk the property, it looks like a property that's going to hold a big buck. Is that the only thing that's prompting you to now throw out cameras or sit and glass, or have you found a bed at that point?
A lot of times I do. If I find a bed, it's a bonus, but a lot of times I do find the bed, and I'm like a little too aggressive. I heard an analogy. I think it was Bill Winke, and I think he described himself as a slow drip on a piece of sandstone versus a pressure washer. And I'm a pressure washer.
Yeah.
So I'm 40 yards off their bed when I'm hunting. So if I find a bed and I think it's his, I'm going to crawl on my hands and knees for a mile with my stand on my back, if I have to get 40 yards from that bed, and I'm going to hunt that bed. I'm not going to play tiddlywinks with them 80 yards, 100 yards away. I'm going to get right in on them and hunt them that way. So if I can find a pinch, I know he has to go through. If I can find a trail, I know he has to squeeze through, or I can find his bed. That's great. And I'll hunt him accordingly. But
I'm looking for the trigger that says, after you've walked a property, that says, okay, I'm willing to now sit here with glass, because that would be hard for me, because I could walk through and be like, I don't know, it feels like a big buck should be here,
Mhm.
but like you said, there are only so many so far, and I have to travel a bunch of counties to get a list together. What's that thing that triggers you to say, you know what, I'm going to invest and throw some glass at this?
Yeah, man, really, I'm an optimist. So I think, my team, my NFL team's going to win the Super Bowl every year. I think there's a big buck. I think there's a Boone and Crockett on every property.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there is at least one big buck on these properties. And these properties I'm hunting are 500, 800, 3,000. I mean, they're pretty big. So odds are, if the cover's there, there's going to be a big buck there.
So that's more important to you than anything, is the cover and the habitat. Yeah, for a big buck.
I won't even look at it if it doesn't have the cover. If it's got cover and there's no trees, then I really like it, because then I know no one's hunting it, and I know the deer love it, especially big bucks. I mean, I find more of these deer where there's no trees than anywhere else. So a big cattail marsh, a 2-year-old cut, a big giant CRP field that's grown up, something like that, wide open marsh, anything with water. If there's water, guys don't even want to look at it. And
Yeah.
that's what I like. That's where I want to be, because that's where the deer are. And to answer your question, I don't know if there's one thing and there's one moment where I'm like, I'm going to spend time here. It's just, I want to spend some time on this property because there's premium cover, there's some sign, there's a food aspect, there's maybe white oaks, crops down the road, there's a marsh. The access is iffy for most guys, and I think I can get around the backside. So if there's stuff that checks boxes subconsciously in my head, I'll spend time there. I'll glass it. I'll run a camera or two, or I'll just hunt it. I'll blind hunt it. I really love doing that. I don't do it often, but it's like Christmas morning when I do, because I just don't know what's out there. Whereas typically I know every deer in the property. It's fun for me to go to a property that I don't know, because it's just like, it could be a big surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. I do that a lot. I rarely actually, and no one should listen to me, because I'm not at a level of success that people should probably follow what I do, but I'll rarely stay at a piece longer than 2 years. I like to just wander and find new things. And at my age, there's probably no change in that. I'm at the later years of my career. I wish I would have done maybe more of like really honing in and seeing how far I could go when I was younger. But I like to, it is like Christmas Day, when you show up on a new property. So I never asked you, by the way, do you ever travel out of state? Or are you just dedicated to where you're at?
I don't, not for whitetail, at least. I've been buying some Iowa points.
Yep.
So that, in the next half decade or whatever it is to get.
I know.
But it's so consuming in New York. And you're Michigan, correct?
Yep.
So it's got to be very similar. I mean, we're just, it's not a great whitetail state. So every ounce of bandwidth I have is dedicated to killing a big deer here. And it doesn't, it's happened the past 6 or 7 years straight, but I know there's going to be years where it doesn't. So, but the time and the effort and the sacrifice I have to make to get it done, I just can't see myself being able to get out of state.
Yeah.
I will eventually. I'll get maybe Ohio, but Iowa's definitely on the horizon once I get enough points.
Nice. So you've gone in, you've scouted the property. It checks the boxes for, possibility of a big buck there. And you've gone out, let's say you put some cameras out. Maybe you got a glimpse of a good one doing that, and I would imagine you can tell as they're starting to grow their antlers, like that's going to potentially be a nice buck. You can tell by the age. Maybe you've gone out and you've glassed and you found one. What do you do now that you found one? Like, what's the next step? Let's say it's summertime and you found one. What are you doing?
At that point, it's just pure entertainment. I mean, I don't know how much value you can get, because a lot of these deer, even if you can glass them every night, I mean, most of these deer that I find and kill or find and hunt, they shift over a mile, sometimes over 2 miles in the fall time. So if you know there's one on the property and he's going to stick around, it's big enough property, just knowing that there's one there from past years or from that spring or summer. I mean, you don't have to find them right away. You can find them in season. A lot of times I do that. But once you know he's there, once you find him prior to the season or you find him in season, then it's like, what more do you need? I mean, that's all the motivation you need to go. And if you're stuck at square one at that point, okay, I know there's a deer here, but I don't know where he is. It's 1,000 acres. Put the stand on your back or leave it in the truck and carry your bow and just go look for him. Period. Literally go look for him. Go try to bump him. You can bump him 3, 4, 5 times and he's going to come back. Unless you shoot him, in my experience, they're going to always come back. They verified when they've been bumped that their bedding strategy works. They're going to come. Sometimes they'll come back 20 minutes later. So if I'm sitting there, and I used to do this a lot when I was younger, I'd have a goal in mind. I want to get to this spot and I want to get up a tree as fast as I can. And then the hunt starts. But that's not true. The hunt starts as soon as I step foot out of my truck and I softly close my truck door and I'm walking and I'm looking and I get off the path. There could be a deer anywhere. There could be a big buck anywhere. So if I don't have one right away, I'm going to look for him. I'm just going to walk every edge. I'm going to walk through every cattail marsh. I'm going to try to bump this deer off every point, every hill. And then you know where he is. Then you're real close. Now you're in, you're really close to being on this buck and in the game because you know where he's at, you know he's there, and you can hunt him accordingly.
Man, that's awesome. I'm similar to you in the whole pressure washer thing. Like I love when you say that, I get excited. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. That's how I'd want to do it. But you've also, like you said earlier, that you've followed deer for years.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing deer that have potential and you're going, one day you're going to reach a certain point and I'm going to go after you. I guess so how often are you watching a target deer that like this is the one I'm going after, like just throughout the year? Like let's say you found one and next year you're going to go after him. He's now your number one. And what does that next year look like? How often are you actually putting eyes on him?
That's been the last 5, 6 plus years for me is, I have a target, I'm hunting him. I'm lucky enough to get him killed or get him shot. And then I have one on the come up right behind him, or 2 or 3, just from spending so much time out there. And they're in the same vicinities. These big bucks, they just keep replacing each other. These high pressure states and high pressure areas, they can only be so many places or else they're dead.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much every year. So like I have 2 or 3 bucks right now that I didn't even hunt last year that were, 130 plus 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. I got a 6-year-old that I might hunt this year. But there's just so much information and on this whiteboard, on that dry erase map in my phone. And I just have years of data on these deer and where they like to be in the summer, where they like to be in the fall, where they like to winter, where I find their sheds, where they like to run and hide when I bump them. I mean, I have that stuff. So it works out.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah. So
go ahead.
So you just said something that really, I think a lot of guys would wonder how you do it. Because I know for sure I do. So I know a lot of people find actually really good bucks in the summertime. They've got cameras, pictures of them. They're pumped up. It's coming into fall, and then boom, gone. How do you find them again? How do you, especially if you're so busy? I mean, you have a target buck. Yeah, and maybe you know where he's at. Like, how do you keep an eye on where these deer are going?
Yeah, so there was really one buck in one year that kind of just like the light bulb just went off. And I think that probably happens for a lot of people. And I had seen this deer in the summertime on a bean field. And it was the biggest deer at that point that I'd ever seen on New York public land. It's actually that deer right there. He grossed 160. And I was just astonished. I'm like, I didn't even think they were that big in New York. And then he was gone. July 30th was the last time I saw him. I think it was July 30th. And that was years ago. And I was just, didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest with you. But I threw a camera up. I had a TRP. I threw a camera up 2 miles from there. I'd actually was sick and tired of not seeing deer. I was sitting in stands. And I was sick and tired of not seeing deer. I said, I'm just going to go look for them. I'm just going to go look for where deer are. I don't care what kind of deer, just where they are. So I'm walking, and I'm walking this cattail edge, and I find this small scrape. This was October 12th. It's a small scrape about that big in the ground. And I set a camera on it. And that night I was out to dinner with my wife, and boom, that deer popped up. And I said, there's no way. It's 2 miles away. There's just no way. And luckily, first things first, you got to have public land big enough for this to happen. Otherwise, if it's 100 acres, they're gone if they go 2 miles. So anyways, he pops up. I hunt him twice. I kill him. And it was just a light bulb moment for me. I'm like, okay, these deer are spending their time in the summer here. And this is the type of place they want to go in the fall. And I think I associate it with security cover. I know I do now, but at the time I'm like, what's the reason? I don't understand why, but I know it's security cover. That's first and foremost for these deer. So now it's just like, okay, I got eyes on him in the summertime. This is great. I can watch him. I could see who he's with. The deer I shot this year was a 6-year-old deer I watched for over 1,000 days. And this deer spent time with a new 1.5-year-old every summer. And he would drag this, whether it was a 1.5-year-old sticking with him or he was dragging this 1.5-year-old with him. They were together until like almost late October. And this 1.5-year-old was so visible. So if I saw him, I knew the big one was there. And it got him shot. I never recovered him. It's a terrible story. I'll get sick thinking about it. But it was October 1 of this year, and I saw that 1.5-year-old, and then here comes that 6-year-old that I was hunting. He came out of this little cattail slough right next to a walking path, and I shot him a frontal shot and never recovered him. But my point is like that summertime information of who he's with, who he's hanging out with, kind of got him in trouble a little bit. And that's the stuff you can pick up on in the summertime. But again, he was 2 miles from where he summered. But knowing that that's kind of where they like to go, crop fields to, river bottom type canary grass habitat, open cover, I like to call it. It only left so many places for me to look. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. It really does. And almost like stupid sense. Like you just wonder why, I'm sitting here thinking like, why haven't I thought of that prior to, it's the whole idea. I don't know why it seems off limits. It seems almost impossible if you haven't done it to think that you could go relocate a buck 2 miles away.
Like I thought that way. I thought it was impossible, but I've done it year after year after year. It's almost like I'm physically chasing them down. I mean, I've ran after it. That buck that I shot the year prior, I ran after him. I chased him. I wanted to see, and actually he was a 3-year-old. I chased him. I wanted to see where he'd go when he was pressured. And this was in the summertime. So I wanted to see where he would run. And then as a 5-year-old, I chased him. I couldn't get a shot at him. He was locked down with a doe October 30th. And I just wanted to see where he'd go. So I chased him. I ran after him. And that just opened my mind to where these deer are spending time. Like otherwise, like you just can't, unless you're spending time with them, and that's all year, you just can't understand them. You just always wonder.
So you said it earlier in the podcast, like almost right away. It's like, get out of the box. You have it's funny what you're saying is like, I'm just thinking of all the like late 90s, early 2000 rules that were beat down in my head. And you're like breaking all of them, and it works. And if anything, look, so we talked about having different belt levels and trying to take something away from this. What can any belt level take away from this conversation? It's to get out of the frickin' box and almost throw away some of this stuff. Just go and just do whatever you have to do to learn as much information as you can from the buck that you want to kill. By all means necessary. Like you even said it, like go in and bump them. Like if you have to do that, go in and bump them. chase him down to see where he's going to run. Look at, 2 miles away to find a piece of property that he would, if you think of like the kind of deer he is, where's he going to bed? He's not there anymore. So where's he at? It's so funny how we limit ourselves. It's like, oh, he moved out the property that I scouted that I was going to hunt this year, so I guess I'm not hunting him anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, screw that. Go find him.
Yeah, there's a giant construct. And I wasn't always like this, but like just trying stuff. Like I'll just try stuff. If I can, I'll lay down and shoot a deer if I have to. If I have to dig a hole, I mean, I've hunted in waist deep water for 4 hours straight because I thought a deer was bedding on a small island inside of a pond. I mean, I was like, there was no other choice. And, most guys, including me years ago, I would have set up in a tree, a perfectly, beanpole tree with my climber 300 yards away if that's where the tree was. But me now knows, like, you can swim up to the deer if you need to.
Yeah.
Swim to get access. I mean, that's my forte, access. I mean, I will do anything to fool and trick a mature deer. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. If I can get dropped off in a helicopter, I will, but I'll do anything to fool them because you can only, in my opinion, and I know like Dan Infalt he's kind of got the same thought, is you can only hunt a spot once. But, and I agree, unless you can access it from a different way, then I think you can hunt it as many times as the access allows. So you just have to be creative. If you have to crawl, crawl. If you have to skip, skip. It doesn't matter what it is. The ground thing, I always thought I had to be in a tree. And I'm like, I don't have to be in a tree. Why do I need to be in a tree? I'll carry the tree stand because it's light and it's compact. It's low profile. But if there's a tree, great. But I've been busted too many times being close to these deer beds, climbing a tree. It's taken me an hour to put 2 sticks up, and then there he goes. So a lot of times now, it's more anxiety driven. I can't bring myself to climb up. I'll just stay on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious on some of these like setups where you've gone and crawled for an hour and moved in and done all these things. How often does that result in, this might be hard to answer. How often does that result in success, or how many times have you put in that work and just to see a deer that day?
Oh, it's a lot. I mean, it's like anybody else. I don't see many deer. I don't see many deer because I'm on public land in New York. And then add in the factor that I'm only targeting 5, 6+ year old deer. You just don't see a lot of deer. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how many hunts I log a year, but I typically kill one deer a year.
Yeah.
So, and I'm out there every day. I tell my wife it's the best day of the year. So, it's almost every day I get out if I can. I try to take 20+ days off in October, and November's kind of a crapshoot because gun season comes in, but try to get it done early October. That's the goal, October 1. But yeah, there's a lot of hunts where it does not happen, but I will not feel like it's not going to happen. Every time I set up, every time I sit down, every time I climb a tree, I feel like I'm going to kill him today, this watch.
Did that come after you were killing big bucks and all of a sudden you had this confidence, or did you have to manufacture that confidence?
No, that came with the experience and the success. I mean,
yeah.
there was 20+ years of, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't know where these deer are. I'm a terrible hunter. And I still, I don't think I'm this great hunter. I am addicted to learning and addicted to being competitive and tenacious and unrelenting. It's Mamba mentality. There's just nothing that's going to stop me from being out there and getting it done. I mean, it's not going to happen every year, but it's not for lack of trying.
Yeah. The experience thing, I'm probably like a yellow belt, you're a black belt. But I do, like, I find my confidence level going up more and more when I'm out in the woods. I'm like, I'm going to kill today. In fact, it is for me now, almost every time I do feel that way. But I think there are some days where I also have to like manufacture the confidence too. where like, I'm not, maybe I felt that way when I first walked out. And now that I'm out there, my confidence just dropped. And I just got to manufacture and be like, F it, man. Like, I'm going to kill today. I'm going to tell myself that, even though I might not be feeling that. I think it does. I can't explain why I think it makes a difference, but I do think it makes you more successful.
I do too. Yeah. Mindset is huge. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been out, and a lot of the times, most of the time, I'm scouting my way in.
Yep.
So that looks like 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm going in for an evening hunt, and it might take me hours and hours. And then, oh, I really like this spot. Bam, there's a guy set up, and I'm already wet up to my waist. Or sweaty, and I'm beat up. So then I circle back, and then I'm like, okay, let me get to this other spot. And there's another guy, or I set up and another guy moves in. I mean, that happens. That's countless times that happens. So there are days where you just have to manufacture the confidence. And sometimes those are the best days, and sometimes they're not. And I'll just walk back to the truck I won't even hunt. It'll be a scouting mission at that point. But sometimes those are the best days.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we go back a little bit when this idea of access and having it generate more than one sit in a spot? Because I think more and more guys are grabbing onto the one sit and then it's done. I know I think that way a lot. When I say that, I say like one set for that time. I might come back like maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month later, give it a shot from another angle or something like that. But usually it's probably two sits for sure for me, and I'm done. I'm like, this isn't going to happen. So if you went in and hunted a spot, say you're hunting a bed and you're hunting a travel run right out of that bed, it doesn't work. Is your thought process, hey, my scent's here now, and he's going to walk through here tomorrow. He's going to realize I was here, and he's going to alter his pattern a little bit. Is that the thought behind it?
Yeah, for sure. So if I'm going to use an example. That deer right there, he was coming to a white oak tree in this transition between a marsh and like open hardwoods. And he was 5 when I killed him, but so he was smart, and he was coming in from the south on a south wind. So he had a tailwind, and it's open cover. So he wants to smell what he can't see, and he wants to see what he can't smell. He's coming in this white oak tree, and I'm set up downwind of him, and he hangs up 60 yards away. I literally jump out of the tree. I do that a lot. I'm low enough. So I jump out and I try to crawl up and sneak up to him, and he busts me with another buck. Actually, a buck that I'm chasing now. So that was 2022. He was with a buck that I'm chasing now, who's 6 now. So everything is just,
yeah.
So anyways, I'm like, man, he's in there and he wants those white oaks. He's not going to deviate. There's just no way. He knows that I'm in there. He's going to come in and bet accordingly. In my mind, that's it. So I try again, and I can't remember if it was the next day or 2 days, but I mean, it was pretty close. It wasn't a week. It's probably the next day. I came in so at that time, I come in from the north. The next time I came in from the west, and he didn't show up, and the other deer did. So he must have known. He must have been on me. He must have been set up. So after that, a couple days later, I went 3+ miles all the way around, and I came in from the south. And I can't remember. These were 3 different winds, and I don't remember exactly what the winds were, but I came in from the south, and I walked a long way in the open, and I set up on some fresh sign. There were some rubs, and I was a little bit closer to where that deer was approaching the first time I had seen him. And it was about 18 minutes before legal shooting light. He's backtracking. It was a stiff westerly wind, and I don't know if he just didn't associate my scent, which was being blown pretty with a stiff wind, as being like fresh, or if he just didn't care. But he backtracked me, and I shot him at 20 yards. And I think I just fooled him with 3 different access routes. He was just assuming that I was going to come in from the north.
Yeah.
And that's what I'll do. And I've done it several times. The buck I killed last year was the same thing. I used a little different access because he had seen me on the initial hunt. So I think you can hunt one spot at least 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have like any bucks always do this? Like these rules are like, or most, not always, but maybe like bucks, like you were mentioning that buck wants to see what he can't smell. How that worked? The wind was coming over his back.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't have any like always or nevers, but
Yep. Good. Yep.
I do hear a lot of bucks, and this is old school thought. I don't think it's, so much now, but bucks will never travel with a tailwind. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In open cover scenarios where they're looking out all day long, or when they transition out of their bed and they can stand and see for 15, 20 minutes, most of the time I'll see them travel with either a crosswind or a lot of times a tailwind. So they can see what they can't smell and they can smell what they can't see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how would you wouldn't want to move any other way?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do see a lot of tailwind movement from these mature bucks in open cover type scenarios.
Yep. Yeah. Makes sense. I should have asked this way back when we first talked about finding the buck, but once you find a buck, are you then going in to look for their beds? Or yeah. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times if I know where he's bedding, I won't do that in season. If I really need to, I'll start doing that in season. I'll start trying to bump them. But postseason, I am like, I'll swim out there. I'll skate on ice if I have to. I want to find like that root clump in the cattails, or that down tree on a side hill, or that, whatever it is, whatever the case is. I want to see it. I want to smell it. I want to feel it. I want to lay in it, because that next year, like that's what I'm hunting pretty much. And I don't see them use the same bed over and over. It's the bedding area, but a lot of times they will come back to those particular beds.
So another question is that you were saying that you hunt as often as you can.
Yeah.
In the season. So then is the weather, the wind, direction, all that dictating your strategy for the day?
There are prime weather conditions and prime wind directions, but most of the time I can get any wind direction to work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yep.
I do have a preference for weather. Like I prefer it to be rainy. I prefer it to be cool. I prefer a stiff wind, but like wind direction, like I think people get too hung up. And for the listeners, like you got to remember public land, like if you're not, somebody else will.
Yeah.
So you just have to do it. I mean, unless you feel like you have exclusive access to this little area nobody knows about. But for me, it's like I have to be the pressure washer. I have to be as aggressive as possible. So if a deer is laying in a spot and he's looking downwind and it's or I have to come in upwind, I'll just come up. I'll be off of them a little bit. You know what I mean? And I'll hunt it still. I'm not going to wait. I can't wait for that perfect wind. It could be a week and he'll be gone. So, and I think that gets a lot of deer killed when people are aggressive with a wind.
Yeah.
Because that deer is comfortable with that wind.
Yeah.
You're out of there because it's not good for you, but it's good for him.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be in there when it's good for him. You just want to be off him a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. So next question I have then is, a lot of guys during preseason scouting, they find an area they like, they start identifying setups. And do you do that? Do you actually, while you're out there scouting, you're like, okay, this is an area that I'm going to hunt, or are you winging it every time you go out because of the wind? Because you don't know what the wind's going to be for the day that you go, so you're like, screw it, I know where he's at. I'm going to head out there and I'll figure it out once I get out there. Yeah,
a lot of times I wing it, but I try to have no boundaries. So I try to be the guy who has a kill tree, who sets up kill trees. A lot of times it just doesn't work out, but I do that. I'll go out and I'll wind map the area, whether it's in season or postseason, and I'll say, okay, this is best set up for me and him with a southwest wind. There's about 5 trees out here, and most of the time they're terrible trees, but I can get in this one, and it works. And I'll try to do it, but If the wind is deviated at all from that scenario, then I'll just have to do something else. And so I don't get too caught up in, having a kill setup. A lot of times, like you said, it's me winging it. And I have to based on different variables.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love that you're just breaking the rules, really. And I believe that. I think I started to develop that attitude the last couple of years, and really, I think it has opened up a ton of opportunity for myself too. And again, I'm hunting a different deer than you are most of the time, so I'm just thinking about how lethal this would be if you were like targeting like a 3.5-year-old buck. Like it would be like lights out. Wouldn't be too hard.
I'll be honest with you. Some of these 3.5, 4-year-old deer, they're everywhere. Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere. They don't know where they want to be, when they want to be there, and I can't get them. Like when they are 5 and 6, even better. They tighten up so much, and they have so much validation built into that little area that got them through 6, 7 hunting seasons. I mean, brutal. I mean, imagine it's Michigan, New York. They're probably not much different. Crossbows, rifles, you name it. It's just brutal out there. They made it 7 hunting seasons, or they're on their 7th. Where else are they going to go? I mean, they're in a 100 by 100 yard area most of the time, and in that early season, and they know what to do. They know where to go. They've done it. They've been there. They've done it. They're not going to deviate. And the 3-year-olds, man, they're just everywhere. 3 and 4-year-olds, they're just kind of everywhere. So it's almost as they get older, they get a little easier if you can find them and if you have them.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. You said in the beginning is go out there and find them. Yeah. So I've kept you on for like an hour and 15 minutes now, and I want to give you an opportunity just in case we didn't cover something that you hoping that we did, and don't feel any pressure to mix anything up. But is there anything that you just wanted to get out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered most of it. I mean, my most important thing, if I'm telling somebody what traits you want to have to be able to consistently kill big deer, is tenacity, the drive, the willingness to break the rules and just forget about the construct of the industry and the gear. Just go out and find the deer and make mistakes. And I mean, it's going to happen. If you do those things and you're creative and you make a ton of mistakes, you're going to learn quick. But if you're timid, you're not aggressive on public land, you're going to be watching a lot of guys carry, the big bucks through the parking lot. So
it always starts with mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Man, I can't thank you enough. Like there's so much here, and I'll just go ahead and announce it right now. We're starting a series where once a month I'm going to break down a podcast. So this one's going to go out, and then I'm already calling it. I'm going to go back because there's so much here to unpack that we're going to break down certain parts of this podcast and talk more in depth. So, man, I really appreciate it. This was a very refreshing conversation. It was actually packed full with real practical application. And, even though you're doing this on another level that takes a huge dedication, I think there's application on every level that you can learn here. And I just really, thanks a lot for taking time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Matt. I'm honored to be on, and it was fun.
Good conversation. So thanks everybody else for coming in and stopping by the dojo. We're going to be back next Thursday with another Whitetail Master. And until then, embrace the journey. Well, that is a wrap for us here at the dojo. We'll be back next Thursday with another Whitetail Master. You can also listen to us every Tuesday for our 10-minute Tuesday episode where I break down a tactic, talk about mindset and personal development, or anything else that might jump in my head in 10 minutes or less. If you like what we are doing here at the dojo, please give us a review. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Mobile Hunters Dojo.